welcome. Happy Monday. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend and you're looking forward to getting into your practice this week and getting some inspiration and motivation today and planning your practice with your template as always so that you can have a really powerful week of practice. And now that it looks like everything is online and live and we are ready to go, then I am happy to officially welcome you to this week's live Monday Music Motivation. So today what we're going to be talking about is something that's extremely relevant to my personal practice and music journey at the moment. I'm very excited that on this Friday, I'm going to be performing Duft by Kaya Sariaho in a sort of Sariaho tribute concert that I'm doing with the Nebula Ensemble. If you aren't familiar with who Kaya Sariaho is or was, she is one of the most significant composers of the 20th and 21st century, has a huge body of work of contemporary classical music, and really did a great job of sort of defining her own style and sort of genre within that bigger niche of contemporary classical music. Unfortunately, she passed away only at the age of 70 from glioblastoma, which I believe is brain tumors, last June. So that's why we're sort of doing this concert, because she was such a significant figure in the contemporary classical space and we wanted to honor her music. I definitely knew about Kaya and knew of her as a significant composer in the contemporary classical space, but I wasn't super familiar with her music before starting to prepare for this concert. So it's been really exciting to do these preparations and sort of get a deeper understanding of her music. And that's what I want to talk about today for sort of your motivation, is how important it is to have that deeper understanding and know where the sort of musical background is coming from, what this particular style of music is, and sort of how it goes. Again, working on Sariaho's music has been super interesting to see how consistent her sort of compositional voice is. I feel like every piece that we're doing on the program, you can tell that it was written by the same composer because of the sort of stylistic things that are in there. Even looking at the notation, there's some very sort of unique things that she does that are just like very part of the style. I'll give one specific example that might be helpful for you to sort of relate things. In her pieces, she often will have a measure, like a 3/8 measure of rest. Even though we're in like 4/4 or 2/4 or 3/4 or some simple meter, she'll put in these compound meters of 3/8, and usually it's a measure of rest. And it's interesting because she does that as almost like a breath mark, but it's a little bit more poignant than a breath mark because it's this full measure of rest. So you need to actually really pause. But it's also interesting that it's not just a full measure of rest in whatever meter we were in. That 3/8 sort of creates this ambiguity to it and this openness of the space to it. So it's really important on those rests. They don't have to be perfectly metrically in time because they are just sort of a silence and a pause, but they need to kind of disrupt the pulse of the music a little bit. And that's a very interesting, very specific stylistic thing to playing her music, that if you're just looking at your one piece in a vacuum, you might not notice those things or be aware of those things. So what I encourage all of you to do this week is whatever music you're working on, see if you can get a little bit more exposure to that composer or even that genre or style. Maybe, for example, you generally play classical music, but you're working on a jazz piece, and maybe it's a very popular, very famous jazz piece that you're working on, and you feel like you understand that piece because you've heard it a lot. I encourage you to listen to maybe some other jazz, especially other jazz sort of related to that and adjacent to that, and see how that might influence your perception. And this could even go for something like Mozart if you're working on. Mozart has very specific stylistic things that we really work on. I think a lot of times when we're thinking about Mozart or Beethoven, especially those two composers, I think sometimes with Bach also, we really think about those stylistic things because that's so important. Especially Mozart, I feel like on the surface level is actually like pretty straightforward music. But when you go a little bit deeper into, okay, yes, there's this scalar run of 16th notes, but exactly what kind of articulation do I want there? Exactly what kind of phrasing do I want there? What's the direction? What's the bigger picture harmony that's happening? When we start thinking about those things, it really opens it up a lot and changes sort of the stylistic interpretation of it. I think in general, we do that pretty well with Mozart, and it's almost like, kind of like those ones I mentioned, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, the stylistic things are always top of mind because they're such significant composers and kind of define their genre and their time period. So we feel like we need to interpret them correctly. But I encourage you to do that no matter what you're working on. Is it a Benny Goodman piece? Because that has a specific style and character to it. Is it a contemporary classical piece? Sarajevo is going to be very different from like a Steve Reich or David Maslanka or any of these other big contemporary classical composers. They have their own sort of style and voice. So I encourage you to listen to other compositions by whoever you're working on so that you can start to understand their voice a little bit better, and as a performer, express their voice. And this can even be true if you're looking at something that's more elementary, like an etude, and working on a specific etude book. See if you can find other compositions by that person, or just listen to other etudes besides just the one that you're working on. For example, with the Rose etudes, if you're a clarinetist, the odd number Rose etudes are the sort of slower lyrical ones. The even number ones are the faster, more technical ones. So depending on which number you're working on, given that context, you might interpret it a little bit differently and think about it differently because you have a deeper understanding of the style, a deeper understanding of the goals. Also with the Rose etudes, knowing that they're adaptations of the Fairling oboe etudes also provides some very interesting stylistic context. So my inspiration and motivation for you is I experienced this learning the Sarajevo piece, that starting to get outside of just my solo clarinet piece and starting to see her other works and how she writes for other instruments has been really eye-opening for how I'm going to interpret my piece. So I encourage you to do the same and find more experience and more understanding of the music, because the first step in the $1 million practice process is how does the music go? And the clearer and more confident and more directed you can be about how the music goes, the clearer target you have to aim for, the more successful you'll be in actually getting the instrument to do the music and interpret it. So that's that. The last thing that we need to do for your Monday music motivation, of course, as always, is to fill out your template. So here is mine for this week. And again, you can go to quickstartclarinet.com/get started to download this, or you can just make it for yourself. But it's the date for what we're focusing on for this week, our reflection of how things are going, our goal for this week, and then some specific plans for time and what you're going to practice. I think all three of these are really important. Reflecting on how things are going and where you're at. I feel like I'm in a good spot with Dooft, and I feel like I really know the music now. Now I'm excited to really apply it to the clarinet and make sure I can get it to come out of the clarinet. So I reflected, I know where I am, I have my goal, I know where I'm going to be able to do that music on the clarinet, continue getting deeper into the music all the way up until the performance, which is on Friday this week. And then the plan is maybe the most actionable, beneficial part of it is where you actually put in your calendar those times. Now I know what I'm working on for the week, and I can have really focused and deliberate, powerful practice rather than just going through the motions and hoping that I improve. I reflected to know where I'm at. I have a goal to know where I'm going, and I know when I'm going to make it happen and each step along the week to reach that goal at the end of the week. So fill out your practice template right when this video is over, put it in your planner, set reminders, do whatever you need to do to make it happen. I hope that you have a fantastic week of practicing. Thanks so much for joining, and I will see you next week on the next live Monday Music Motivation. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.